Sophia Moretti's tray didn't even slow down as she walked past table 7. That should have been her first warning that tonight would change everything. If you're invested in seeing how Sophia navigates this impossible situation, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Now, let's check to the story. Sophia Moretti's tray didn't even slow down as she walked past table 7. That should have been her first warning that tonight would change everything. Normal servers trembled when assigned to the Mafia table. Veterans of the restaurant industry had quit on the spot rather than serve them. Castello Nero's staff drew straws every Friday night, and whoever lost would spend the evening enduring verbal abuse, impossible demands, and the kind of humiliation that left people crying in the walk-in freezer. But Sophia just walked past them, not in a hurry, not making excuses. She simply served every other table in her section with perfect professionalism while treating table 7 like they were invisible. Around them, Castello Nero had gone completely silent. The other servers had retreated to the kitchen. The sommelier watched from behind the bar, his face pale. Even the pianist's fingers faltered over the keys, the melody dying mid-phrase, because everyone who worked at Castello Nero knew what happened to people who disrespected table 7. They had all seen it before. The Mafia table would complain, loud and vicious, and then they would make sure their victim's life fell apart piece by piece until there was nothing left. Sophia had only been working here for 3 weeks, but she had heard the stories about the waiter who had brought the appetizers 30 seconds too slow and ended up blacklisted from every upscale restaurant in the city. About the manager who had tried to enforce basic courtesy and lost her restaurant, her reputation, and her savings defending herself in court from fabricated accusations. About the bartender who had accidentally made eye contact wrong and needed 17 stitches. Table 7 belonged to the Salvatore family, the organization that controlled the waterfront, the protection rackets, the loan operations, and half the legitimate businesses in the Italian district. Their influence reached into construction unions, restaurant supply chains, and city permits. But they operated with a particular cruelty in public spaces, using restaurants as theaters to display their power. And Leonardo Salvatore, sitting at the head of the table, was the director of these performances. "Excuse me," one of Leo's companions called out, his voice sharp with indignation. "We've been sitting here for 15 minutes. Sophia paused at another table, carefully setting down water glasses. "I'll be with you shortly," she said, not even turning to look at them. "Shortly?" The man's voice rose. "Do you know who we are?" "I'm aware," Sophia replied calmly, moving to take an order from an elderly couple at table 3. The tension in the restaurant was suffocating. Customers at other tables had stopped eating, their forks suspended midair. The kitchen staff peered through the service window, wide-eyed. This was unprecedented. This was suicide. But Leo Salvatore wasn't watching Sophia with anger. He was watching her with fascination. He had been coming to Castello Nero every Friday for 5 years, and in all that time, he had seen servers grovel, managers apologize, owners offer free meals. He had watched his companions enjoy the spectacle of making people squirm. It was theater, a weekly reminder of their position in the hierarchy. But this woman, this waitress with the tired eyes and the calm expression, was doing something none of them had ever done. She was removing their power by refusing to acknowledge it existed. She wasn't challenging them. She wasn't defiant or confrontational. She was simply treating them like any other table that would be served in due course. And somehow, that was more devastating than any direct confrontation could have been. "Leo," his lieutenant Marco hissed, leaning closer. "Are you going to let her disrespect us like this?" Leo raised one hand slightly, a gesture that meant silence. His dark eyes followed Sophia as she moved through her section with professional efficiency. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't nervous. She served an appetizer here, refilled a wine glass there, all while maintaining a radius around table 7 as if it simply didn't exist. "She's not disrespecting us," Leo said quietly. "She's ignoring us. There's a difference." "It's the same thing," Marco snapped. "No," Leo corrected, his voice thoughtful. "Disrespect acknowledges power while refusing to submit to it. Ignoring us suggests our power is irrelevant. She's not afraid enough to defy us." She's too exhausted to care. He watched as Sophia finally approached their table 25 minutes after they had been seated. She pulled out her order pad with the same professional courtesy she had shown every other customer. "Good evening," she said, her voice neutral. "Can I start you with drinks?" The silence at the table was electric. Marco looked ready to explode. Two of the other men were half out of their seats, but Leo gestured for them to sit. "You made us wait," Marco said coldly. "Yes," Sophia agreed, not apologizing, not explaining, just acknowledging the fact. "Do you know what happens to people who disrespect this table?" Marco continued, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Sophia looked at him then, and her eyes were empty of fear. Not brave, just hollow. "I imagine you make their lives difficult," she said quietly. "But with respect, sir, my life is already difficult. You'd have to get in line." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to them in years. Leo leaned back in his chair, studying this strange woman who treated their threats like background noise. "What's her name?" he asked. "Sophia Moretti." "You're new here." 3 weeks. "Yes, sir." She didn't ask how he knew. Of course he knew. "You're not afraid of consequences," Leo observed. "I'm terrified of consequences," Sophia corrected, meeting his eyes. "But I'm more afraid of what happens to me if I spend the rest of my life bowing to people who enjoy making others feel small. There are worse things than losing a job." Something shifted in Leo's expression. His companions were still outraged, still waiting for him to give the signal to destroy this woman. But Leo was seeing something they weren't. This wasn't rebellion. This was burnout so complete that fear had lost its power. This was someone who had already lost so much that their threats meant nothing. "Leave us," Leo said to his companions. "Leo," Marco started. "I said leave us." His voice carried absolute authority. "All of you. Now." The men exchanged confused glances but obeyed, filing out of the restaurant like predators being called off a kill. The tension in the room shifted from suffocating to uncertain. Sophia stood alone at table 7, facing Leonardo Salvatore, and she still didn't look afraid. She looked tired. "Sit down," Leo said quietly. "I'm working," Sophia replied.
"Seat."
"Down." Not a threat.
A request.
Sophia glanced at her manager, who was watching from across the room with an expression of absolute terror. Then she pulled out the chair across from Leo and sat, her order pad still in her hand. "You made an interesting choice tonight," Leo said. "Most people would have apologized, tried to make excuses." "Would that have changed anything?" Sophia asked. "No," he admitted. "It would have made the evening more entertaining for my associates, but nothing would have changed for you." "Then I saved us both some time." Leo almost smiled. "Almost. Tell me something, Sophia Moretti. What did you do before you started waiting tables?" "I was a social worker," she said. "Community outreach coordinator for a nonprofit that ran after-school programs and addiction recovery services in the Italian district. Was. Budget cuts. The organization closed 3 months ago." Her voice was flat, stating facts. "Turns out helping people doesn't pay well. Turns out it doesn't pay at all, actually." "So, you went from trying to save your community to serving its worst elements overpriced pasta." "I went from idealism to survival," Sophia corrected. "It's a common trajectory." Leo studied her for a long moment. "I have a proposition for you. I'm not interested in whatever you're selling, Mr. Salvatore. You don't know what I'm offering." "I know what you represent," Sophia said. "I spent 2 years trying to help families destroyed by organizations like yours. Addiction, debt, violence, extortion. I've seen what your world does to people. And yet you're not afraid of me." "I didn't say that." Sophia met his eyes. "I said I'm more afraid of something else. Of spending the rest of my life too exhausted to care about anything. Of becoming someone who just survives instead of lives. Your threats are concrete and immediate. That fear is slower and more permanent. So you'd rather provoke me than let that fear win?" "I'd rather treat you like any other customer than perform fear on command." Leo leaned forward. "What if I told you I could offer you a way back to the work you used to do? Real work. Meaningful work. with better resources than your nonprofit ever had. Sophia's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Interest. Suspicion. I'd say that sounds too good to be true. It is, Leo admitted. Because it would mean working for me. Doing what, exactly? I run a charitable foundation, he said. Community programs in the Italian district. After-school tutoring, job training, addiction recovery support, elderly care services. Everything your organization tried to do, but with sustainable funding. Sophia stared at him. You're telling me the Mafia runs charity programs? I'm telling you I fund community programs through a private foundation. What I do with the rest of my time is separate. No, it's not, Sophia said flatly. You can't separate the money from where it comes from. Perhaps not entirely, Leo agreed. But I can tell you that the programs are real. The people they help are real. The staff who run them believe in the work. And they need someone with your experience to manage the operation. Someone who understands community needs and isn't easily intimidated. Someone who'll take dirty money and pretend it's clean. Someone who'll take money that exists and use it to do actual good, Leo countered. Tell me, Sophia Moretti, if you had the choice between refusing on principle and watching those programs help no one, or accepting and watching them help thousands, which choice does more good? It was the worst kind of question, the kind that had no right answer. Why me? Sophia asked. You could hire anyone. Because everyone else is afraid of me, Leo said simply. They tell me what I want to hear. They perform gratitude and loyalty. You walked past my table like I didn't exist. That means you see clearly. That means I can trust your judgment. You don't know anything about me. I know you stood up when everyone else bowed. I know you chose dignity over safety. I know you've already sacrificed your comfort for your principles. He pulled a business card from his jacket. I know enough. Sophia took the card. It was expensive stock with a single phone number. The position pays $120,000 a year, Leo continued. Full benefits. Budget authority over program operations. You'd work with the foundation staff, not with my business associates. It was more money than Sophia had ever made. It was also a deal with the devil. I need to think about it, she said. Of course. Leo stood. You have until Monday evening. Call that number with your answer. He placed $500 bills on the table. For the inconvenience of making us wait, he said. Then he walked out, leaving Sophia sitting alone at table 7, holding a business card that represented an impossible choice. The restaurant released its held breath. Sophia's manager rushed over, his face pale. What did he say to you? He whispered urgently. Are you okay? Sophia looked at the business card, at the simple phone number that could change everything. He offered me a job, she said quietly. And Sophia thought about her closed community center, the families she couldn't help anymore, the work she missed desperately. She thought about the children who needed after-school programs and the addicts who needed recovery support. She thought about doing real work versus waiting tables. She thought about selling her soul versus watching it slowly wither from disuse. And I don't know, Sophia admitted. I honestly don't know. But even as she said it, she knew she would call that number. Because Leo Salvatore had understood something about her that she barely admitted to herself. She was drowning in purposelessness, and he was offering her a lifeline. The question wasn't whether she would take it. The question was whether she could grab on without losing herself completely in the process. This modeled introduction follows the competitor's narrative structure asterisk. Opens with a visceral moment of defiance. Establishes the antagonist's fearsome reputation through concrete examples. Creates a pressure cooker atmosphere where everyone watches. Shows the protagonist's awareness of danger while maintaining unusual composure. Positions the protagonist as different from others who have faced this situation. Introduces the male lead through quiet observation rather than loud action. Ends with an impossible offer that sets the story in motion. Maintains psychological tension throughout rather than physical confrontation. Reveals character through action and dialogue rather than exposition. Creates moral complexity immediately. Sophia's hands stayed steady as she walked through the silent restaurant toward table 7. Every eye followed her. The other servers had pressed themselves against the walls like they were trying to merge with the wallpaper. Even the customers seemed frozen, forks suspended midair, conversations died mid-sentence. Marco stood as she approached, his expression promising violence. The other men at the table looked equally dangerous, their hands moving toward their jackets in a choreographed threat. "Sit down," Leo said quietly, and they obeyed instantly, though Marco's jaw clenched like he was swallowing glass. Sophia stopped at the table's edge, maintaining professional distance. Leo gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Please." It wasn't a request, but it wasn't quite a command either. Sophia sat, keeping her spine straight, her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that showing fear only made bullies hungrier. Leo studied her with dark, intelligent eyes. The silence stretched until Marco shifted impatiently, but Leo raised one finger, and the man went still. "Why?" Leo finally asked. Sophia met his gaze. "Why what? Why ignore us? You knew who we were. You heard the stories. Why choose tonight to make that particular statement?" She could have lied, could have claimed she was overwhelmed, distracted, anything that might save her job. Instead, Sophia heard herself tell the truth. "Because I'm tired," she said. "Tired of watching people like you get away with cruelty just because everyone's too afraid to do anything else. Tired of watching grown men enjoy making a 22-year-old waitress cry. Tired of pretending that's normal." She paused. "You are going to make my night miserable whether I served you immediately or made you wait. At least this way, I kept my dignity." Marco started to rise. Leo's hand moved fractionally, and the man froze. "Interesting," Leo said, his tone thoughtful rather than angry. "You didn't make a scene. Didn't complain to management or confront us directly. You just removed our power by refusing to participate in the performance." He tilted his head slightly. "That requires understanding how power actually works. Where did you learn that?" "Social work," Sophia said. "Community outreach in the Italian district. You learn quickly that you can't fight every battle head-on. Sometimes the best resistance is refusing to engage on their terms." Something shifted in Leo's expression. "Community outreach. Which organization?" "Hope House. We ran after-school programs, addiction recovery services." Past tense settled between them like ash. "Budget cuts closed us 3 months ago." The table had gone absolutely silent. Even Marco looked uncertain now, glancing between Leo and Sophia like he was watching a conversation in a language he didn't speak. Leo was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming once against the white tablecloth. Then he reached into his jacket. Sophia tensed involuntarily and withdrew a business card. "Tomorrow," he said, sliding it across the table. 2 o'clock. The address is on the back. I have an opportunity one think you'll find interesting." Sophia looked at the card but didn't touch it. "What kind of opportunity?" "The kind we discuss in private." Leo stood, and his men immediately followed suit. "Tomorrow, Sophia Moretti. Don't disappoint me." They left without ordering, without another word. The restaurant remained frozen until the door closed behind them, and then the room erupted in whispered chaos. Sophia sat alone at table 7, staring at the business card on the white tablecloth. Her manager was rushing toward her, his face pale with either fury or terror. She picked up the card. The front held only a phone number. The back had an address in the Italian district, the old neighborhood, where Hope House used to be. Tomorrow, she thought. God help her, she was actually considering going. The address led Sophia to a renovated building 3 blocks from where Hope House used to stand. She recognized the neighborhood immediately, the cracked sidewalks she'd walked 1,000 times, the bodega on the corner where Mrs. Chen always asked about her programs, the playground where she'd organized summer activities for kids who had nowhere else to go. The building's glass doors opened to reveal everything Sophia had dreamed Hope House could have been with proper funding. Clean floors, modern furniture, bright lighting, the smell of fresh paint instead of mold and desperation. Leo was waiting in the lobby, dressed more casually than he'd been at the restaurant. He looked almost normal until you noticed how the security guard straightened when he entered, how the receptionist's smile was just a fraction too careful. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Let me show you what we do here." The tour felt like walking through an alternate timeline of her own past. The after-school tutoring program had proper textbooks and qualified teachers instead of volunteers struggling with donated materials. The computer lab had equipment from this decade. The addiction recovery space had private counseling rooms and a medical consultant on staff 3 days a week. In the community room, a group of teenagers were working on college applications. One of them looked up as they passed, and his entire face transformed. "Mr. Leo." The kid abandoned his essay to rush over. "Did you see? I got accepted to Rutgers." "Marcus." Leo's expression softened in a way that seemed almost painful, like a muscle he rarely used. "That's excellent news. Your mother must be proud." She cried for like an hour. Marcus grinned, then noticed Sophia. "This is the new director?" "Potentially," Leo said. Sophia watched the exchange with growing unease. The affection was genuine. The kid wasn't performing gratitude. He actually liked Leo. She saw the same thing repeated as they continued the tour. Elderly residents in the senior care program greeting him by name, a woman in recovery thanking him for the second chance, parents picking up their children from tutoring with real relief in their eyes. This wasn't a front. This was real work helping real people. They ended the tour in an empty office overlooking the street. Leo closed the door and gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Managing Director," he said without preamble. $120,000 annual salary. Full authority over program operations, hiring, and budget allocation. You'd work with our existing staff, but have final decision-making power on all community initiatives. Sophia's entire body felt tight. "Why me?" "Because you understand this community. You know what these people need because you've been doing this work for years." He paused. "And because you're not afraid to tell me no. I should tell you no right now. But you won't." Leo leaned back. "Because you've spent the last 3 months watching the programs you built collapse. You've seen kids go back to the streets, addicts relapse without support, elderly residents lose their only social connection. You know exactly what happens when this work stops. And you're funding it with what? Drug money? Protection rackets?" Sophia's voice was sharper than she intended. "You want me to take blood money and pretend it's philanthropy? I want you to take money that exists and use it to do genuine good," Leo said calmly. "The money isn't clean, Sophia. I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. But the work is real. Those kids are really getting into college. That woman is really 6 months sober. The community is really being helped. By a criminal organization. By a foundation that employs social workers, teachers, counselors, and administrators who believe in what they're doing." He met her eyes. "You can refuse on principle and walk away. The programs will continue, but without someone who actually understands community needs. Or you can accept and make sure the work stays genuine." Sophia looked out the window at the neighborhood. She'd tried so hard to help. "I need to see the books first," she heard herself say. "All of them. Foundation finances, funding sources, program budgets. Everything." Leo smiled slightly. Monday morning, 9 o'clock. She was already compromised, and they both knew it. Sophia's first month passed in a blur of budget meetings, program evaluations, and staff introductions that complicated everything she thought she knew about Leo Salvatore's world. Maria Rodriguez had been using for 8 years before the Foundation's recovery program saved her life. Now she ran those same programs with the intensity of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. She stayed late every Thursday to lead group sessions, knew every participant by name, and cried openly when they celebrated milestones. James Mitchell had taught high school English for 30 years before retiring, then couldn't stand the emptiness of his days. The Foundation's literacy program gave him purpose again. He talked about his students' progress the way other people talked about their grandchildren, with fierce pride and unconditional belief. Elena Vasquez coordinated elderly services with the efficiency of a military operation and the compassion of a saint. She remembered birthdays, medication schedules, and which residents needed extra checking on during cold weather. Sophia watched her spend 20 minutes on the phone convincing a lonely widower to come to the weekly social group and felt something crack in her careful cynicism. These people weren't criminals. They were believers. They genuinely cared about the work, and the work was genuinely helping people. Sophia found herself staying later each evening, reviewing program outcomes and expansion proposals. The foundation had resources Hope House could only dream of, and she couldn't stop herself from imagining what they could do with proper funding. A mental health counselor on staff. Extended hours for the computer lab. A partnership with the local hospital for health screenings. Leo started joining her around 9 o'clock, when the building had emptied and the city noise had softened to a distant hum. He'd bring coffee and they'd discuss strategies for reaching more families, optimizing program schedules, addressing gaps in services. He was brilliant. Sophia hadn't expected that. Every suggestion was measured, every decision considered from multiple angles. He understood the neighborhood's rhythms, knew which streets had the most need, which families were struggling quietly, which kids were at risk. "How do you know all this?" she asked one night, 3 weeks into her tenure. Leo was quiet for a moment, staring at the budget spreadsheet on her screen. "This was my neighborhood. I grew up 3 blocks from here. I know these streets because I was one of those kids who needed programs like this and didn't have them. So you became what you became instead." "I became what my circumstances allowed." His voice carried something Sophia couldn't quite name. "My father's expectations, the neighborhood's limitations, the choices that seemed inevitable at the time. Do you ever regret it?" The question hung between them. Leo looked at her with an expression that was almost painful in its honesty. "Every day," he said quietly. "But regret doesn't change anything. You become who you become, make the choices you make. You can't unmake them. You can only try to do something meaningful with what you've built." Sophia wanted to argue, to tell him people could change, rebuild, start over. But she looked at the community center they were sitting in, at the programs helping hundreds of families, at the complicated machinery that made it all possible. "I'm starting to care," she admitted. "About the work, the people. I didn't want to, but I do." "Good," Leo said. "That means you're human. That means you're the right person for this." But Sophia wasn't sure if being the right person for this work meant she was becoming the wrong version of herself. Isabella Salvatore walked into the foundation on a Tuesday morning, like she owned the building. She probably did, technically. Everything connected to Leo seemed to exist in a legal gray area that shifted depending on who was asking. She was stunning in the way that required money and effort, tailored suit, perfect hair, jewelry that caught the light with calculated precision. But her eyes were cold, assessing Sophia with the kind of contempt usually reserved for insects. "You must be the new hire," Isabella said, closing Sophia's office door without invitation. "The social worker with a conscience. How refreshing." Sophia stood slowly. "Can I help you with something?"
I'm Isabella Salvatore.
Leo's sister. She settled into the chair across from Sophia's desk with practiced elegance. "I'm here to offer you some advice before you destroy your life completely. I wasn't aware I'd asked for advice. Consider it a professional courtesy." Isabella's smile was sharp as broken glass. "This foundation you're so earnestly managing? It's money laundering. Every program, every service, every dollar you spend, it's all part of washing my brother's blood money clean. And when the federal authorities finish their investigation, everyone involved will face criminal charges." Sophia's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime." Isabella leaned forward. "My brother destroys everything he touches. Our father, our family, this neighborhood. He wraps it in philanthropy and community service, but underneath it's all rot. And now he's wrapped you in it too. Why are you telling me this?" "Because unlike the other people Leo surrounds himself with, you don't seem entirely corrupted yet. You actually believe in the work." Isabella's voice softened fractionally. "I'm giving you a chance to walk away before you become complicit in his crimes. Before you lose everything defending something that was never real." She stood, placing a business card on Sophia's desk. "When you're ready to do the right thing, call me. I'm working with people who can protect you if you cooperate. After Isabella left, Sophia sat in the silence trying to steady her breathing. She pulled up the foundation's financial records she'd been reviewing for weeks and started looking with different eyes. The funding sources were complex, multiple LLCs, offshore accounts, investment portfolios that seemed legitimate but interconnected in ways that made her uneasy. She'd noticed some irregularities before but had convinced herself they were just the messy reality of private foundation accounting. Now she saw patterns that didn't quite fit. Money moving in predictable cycles, amounts that seemed calculated rather than organic, timing that aligned too perfectly with program expenses. Isabella was partially right. The foundation was being used for something beyond simple charity. But as Sophia dug deeper, she found discrepancies that didn't match typical money laundering either. Expenses that exceeded what would be necessary for front operation. Programs that cost more to run than they could possibly justify for tax purposes. Real outcomes that went beyond what would be needed for appearances. When Leo arrived that evening, Sophia was waiting. "Your sister came to see me," she said without preamble. Leo's expression went carefully blank. "What did Isabella tell you?" "That the foundation is money laundering. That I'm being used. That federal authorities are investigating." Sophia met his eyes. "Is she right?" "Isabella blames me for our father's death," Leo said quietly. "She blames me for the path our family took, for the choices I made. She's dedicated her life to destroying mine." "That's not an answer." "The foundation's finances are complicated," Leo admitted. "Some of the funding comes from sources that wouldn't survive federal scrutiny. But it's not as simple as Isabella wants you to believe. The work is real, Sophia. The money we spend actually helps people. But the money itself is dirty." "The money exists," Leo said. "The question is whether it does more good going into these programs or staying in offshore accounts." Sophia looked at him, at the man who'd offered her purpose and compromise in equal measure. "I think there's something else happening here. Something neither of you is telling me." Leo was quiet for a long moment. "You're right to be suspicious. But I need you to trust me a little longer." Trust, Sophia thought, was becoming dangerously easy where Leo Salvatore was concerned. Sophia spent the next week watching. It was a skill she developed during her social work years, observing patterns, noting inconsistencies, seeing the connections people tried to hide. She told herself she was protecting the foundation, protecting the staff who genuinely believed in their work. But she knew she was also protecting Leo, and that complicated everything. Isabella visited the foundation 3 more times, always unannounced, always asking pointed questions about specific financial transactions. Sophia noticed the timing. Each visit came exactly 2 days before scheduled financial audits. Someone was coordinating information, creating a trail. On Thursday, Sophia saw Isabella having coffee with a man she recognized from Leo's careful warnings about neighborhood power structures.
Vincent Russo.
Second-generation crime family, Leo's primary rival for control of the waterfront operations. Sophia took a photo from across the street, feeling ridiculous and necessary in equal measure. 2 days later, she documented another meeting, this time with a federal agent whose face she'd seen in news articles about organized crime investigations. Isabella wasn't just exposing Leo. She was working with his enemies to destroy him, and the foundation was leverage, proof of money laundering, evidence that could bring criminal charges against everyone involved. The staff Sophia had come to care about would be collateral damage in a family war that had nothing to do with them. She brought her findings to Leo late one evening. He studied the photos with an expression that managed to be both resigned and wounded. "I always knew she hated me," he said quietly. "I didn't realize how completely. This isn't just about hate. She's allied with the Russo family. That's strategic. Isabella was always smarter than me. More principled too, or so she believed." Leo looked out the window at the neighborhood lights. "After our father died, she wanted us to go legitimate, walk away from everything. I told her it was impossible. She's been proving me wrong by trying to destroy me ever since." Sophia sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Tell me about him. Your father." Leo was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "He was a complicated man. violent when he needed to be, generous when he could afford it. He built this empire thinking it would protect our family, give us security. Instead, it got him killed and turned Isabella against me. And you inherited something you never wanted. I inherited something I was raised to want. There's a difference. His voice carried exhaustion that went bone deep. By the time I understood what it actually meant, I was already too deep to find another path. Sophia thought about her own compromises, the idealism she'd traded for pragmatism. We're both trying to save something that might be past saving. Leo turned to look at her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her chest tight. Maybe. But I'm glad I'm not trying alone. The kiss happened without decision, without thought. One moment they were sitting in comfortable proximity, and the next Leo's hand was cupping her face, and Sophia was leaning into him like he was something solid in a world that kept shifting. When they pulled apart, Sophia's heart was racing. This is a terrible idea. Probably, Leo agreed. Does that mean you want to stop? Sophia looked at him. This man who funded community programs with criminal money, who was hated by his sister and hunted by his rivals, who somehow made her feel like she was doing meaningful work despite knowing better. No, she admitted. God help me, no. She kissed him again, and it felt like choosing something she couldn't unchoose, crossing a line she couldn't see, but knew was there. Outside, the city continued its complicated dance of light and shadow, legality and crime, idealism and survival. And Sophia realized she'd stopped being able to tell the difference. Isabella returned on a Friday afternoon with a leather portfolio and the expression of someone holding all the cards. She didn't bother with pleasantries this time, just spread documents across Sophia's desk like a prosecutor laying out a case. Financial records showing systematic money laundering through the foundation, Isabella said, her voice clinical. Coded communications between Leo and his associates about using community programs as fronts. Photographs of cash transfers. Testimony from former employees willing to cooperate. She looked up. It's comprehensive, Sophia. Enough to put Leo away for 20 years and bring criminal charges against everyone who touched foundation money. Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the evidence. It was devastating. Meticulously documented proof of exactly what she'd feared from the beginning, that the good work was built on criminal infrastructure. Why are you showing me this? Because federal prosecutors are moving forward within the week. When they do, everyone connected to the foundation will be arrested. Staff, volunteers, anyone who received funding. Isabella's voice softened fractionally. Unless they have reason to believe someone was cooperating. Someone who can testify about Leo's operations from the inside. The implications settled like ice water. You want me to testify against him. I'm offering you immunity and witness protection in exchange for your cooperation. You walk away clean, start over somewhere new. The alternative is facing charges as an accomplice to money laundering and racketeering. Sophia looked at the evidence again, seeing Maria's name in financial records, James listed as a program director, Elena's signature on grant applications. Innocent people who genuinely believed in the work, who had no idea the foundation was anything more than what it appeared to be. These charges would destroy everyone, Sophia said quietly. Maria, James, Elena, they're not criminals. They're social workers and teachers and caregivers who trusted that the work was legitimate. They were naive. That doesn't make them innocent in the eyes of the law. You're willing to destroy their lives just to hurt your brother? Isabella's expression hardened. I'm willing to stop a criminal organization that's been operating with impunity for decades. If there's collateral damage, that's on Leo, not me. He built this house of cards knowing it would eventually collapse. The programs help real people. The kids are getting into college, addicts are getting sober, elderly residents have community support. You shut this down, all of that disappears. Some things need to burn, Isabella said coldly, so something better can grow. That's how real change happens. Sophia thought about Leo's vulnerability, about his admission that he didn't know how to be anything else. She thought about Marcus getting into Rutgers, about the woman 6 months sober, about the elderly widower Elena had convinced to join the social group. She thought about the impossible position of choosing between protecting corruption and destroying genuine good. How long do I have? Sophia asked. 72 hours. After that, the arrests happen with or without your cooperation. Isabella stood, gathering her evidence. Choose wisely, Sophia. Your idealism is admirable, but it won't protect you in federal prison. After Isabella left, Sophia sat in the silence, trying to breathe. She had 3 days to decide whether to betray Leo or become complicit in his destruction. 3 days to choose between principle and pragmatism, between the law and what felt like justice. Or 3 days to find a third option that shouldn't exist but had to. She picked up her phone and started making calls. If Isabella and the prosecutors wanted to burn everything down, Sophia would have to build something fireproof first. Sophia didn't sleep for 72 hours. She spent the time doing what she'd been trained to do, investigating, documenting, finding patterns that others missed. She started with Leo's actual operations, separating foundation work from criminal enterprise. What she found surprised her. Over the past 3 years, Leo had been systematically reducing his involvement in traditional rackets. Protection operations had been scaled back. Loan sharking had virtually disappeared. The waterfront operations were increasingly legitimate shipping contracts rather than smuggling. He was trying to go straight. Slowly, carefully, but genuinely trying. He just didn't know how to complete the transition without losing everything to rivals like the Russo family, who would see any weakness as an opportunity. Sophia then mapped Isabella's evidence against federal prosecution priorities. The Russo family had been the FBI's primary target for years. Larger operation, more violence, interstate trafficking that crossed federal jurisdiction. Leo was secondary, almost incidental. An idea began forming. Dangerous, complicated, but possible. She reached out to a former colleague who'd moved to the U.S. Attorney's office. They met in a coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from the Italian district. Hypothetically, Sophia said, what would prosecutors offer someone with detailed information about the Russo family's operations? Someone willing to cooperate fully in exchange for immunity and restructuring agreements. Her colleague studied her carefully. Hypothetically, if the information was solid enough to take down a major criminal organization, almost anything. The U.S. attorney has been trying to build a RICO case against the Russos for 5 years. Sophia spent another day verifying Leo's knowledge of Russo operations. He knew shipping schedules, money flows, corrupt officials, the entire infrastructure. Years of rivalry meant he'd been tracking their operations as carefully as they'd tracked his. She compiled everything into a proposal. Leo provides comprehensive testimony against the Russo family in exchange for immunity from prosecution. His operations are restructured under federal monitoring. Legitimate businesses continue. Criminal enterprises are dismantled completely. The foundation becomes independent with transparent funding sources and external oversight. Staff members receive immunity as unwitting participants. When she presented it to Leo that evening, she expected resistance, denial, anger. Instead, he read through the 30-page document in silence, his expression unreadable. You really think there's a way out? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia met his eyes. Yes. But it requires you to choose it every single day. This isn't redemption. You don't get absolved. It's transformation. You become something different, piece by piece, and you don't get to stop when it gets difficult. I have to testify against the Russo family. They'd put a price on my head. Federal protection. New identity, if necessary. It's in the proposal. Leo was quiet for a long moment. Isabella would see this as validation. Proof that I was always a criminal who needed to be stopped. Isabella sees what she wants to see. This isn't about proving her right or wrong. It's about whether you want to keep being who you've been or become who you could be. And you. Leo looked at her. What happens to you in this scenario? I stay with the foundation. Make sure it becomes what it should have been from the beginning, legitimate, transparent, actually helping people without the moral compromise. Sophia paused. Separate from you, professionally. Whatever we are personally, that's different. But I can't manage a foundation funded by criminal operations. Not anymore. So I lose everything. You trade one kind of power for another. The foundation continues, your legitimate businesses continue, the community programs continue. You lose the empire, but you keep what actually matters. She reached across the desk. Isn't that what you said? That you don't know how to be anything else?
This is how.
One choice, one day at a time. Leo looked at the proposal, at Sophia, at the impossible possibility of actually walking away from his father's legacy. Set up the meeting, he said quietly. Let's see if the prosecutors believe in third options. The meeting happened in a federal building in Lower Manhattan, in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and institutional anxiety. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Chen sat across from Leo and Sophia with the expression of someone who'd seen every con and believed none of them. Let me understand this correctly, Chen said, reviewing Sophia's proposal. Leonardo Salvatore wants to provide testimony against the Russo crime family in exchange for immunity, restructuring agreements, and protection for his charitable foundation staff. Comprehensive testimony, Sophia corrected. Shipping operations, money laundering infrastructure, corrupt officials, interstate trafficking. Everything needed to build a RICO case that actually sticks. In exchange for what, exactly? Witness protection? Immunity from all charges? Immunity for cooperation, federal monitoring during restructuring of legitimate operations, protection for foundation staff who had no knowledge of criminal funding sources. Sophia kept her voice steady. And the foundation continues operating under independent oversight with transparent funding. Chun looked at Leo. Why now? You've been operating for 2 decades. Why suddenly develop a conscience? Because continuing costs more than it's worth, Leo said quietly. And because someone showed me there might be another path. The negotiations took 6 hours. Chun wanted details Leo wasn't ready to provide. Sophia insisted on ironclad protection for Maria, James, Elena, and the other staff members. The prosecutors were skeptical about the foundation's legitimacy. They'd seen too many criminal enterprises hide behind charity. These programs are real, Sophia argued, pulling up outcome data. College acceptance rates, recovery success metrics, elderly care engagement numbers. This isn't a front. It's a genuine operation that happened to be funded through complicated sources. Illegal sources, Chen corrected. Sources that can become legal with proper restructuring. Unless you'd prefer to shut down programs that are actually helping hundreds of families just to make a point about money's origins. Chen studied her. You're awfully invested in protecting a criminal organization's assets. I'm invested in protecting people who've done nothing wrong except work for an organization they believed was legitimate. The breakthrough came when Leo provided documentation of a Russo family shipment scheduled for the following week, weapons trafficking that crossed 3 state lines. Chen's entire demeanor shifted. This was the kind of evidence that could justify the deal. But there was a complication. Your sister, Chen said, reviewing Leo's list of Russo associates.
Isabella Salvatore.
Our investigation shows she's been meeting with Vincent Russo regularly. She's provided information about your operations, but she might also be implicated in conspiracy charges. Sophia watched Leo's face carefully. This was the moment where family loyalty could destroy everything. Isabella believes she's exposing criminal activity, Leo said slowly. She's not working with the Russo family. She's being used by them. There's a difference. That's a legal distinction prosecutors might not care about, Chen said. Sophia leaned forward. If this deal is about transformation, it has to be complete. Breaking the cycle means breaking it entirely. No revenge, no retribution, even when it's deserved. Isabella gets immunity too, or the whole thing falls apart. Leo looked at her. She tried to destroy me. And if you destroy her back, you're still the same person you've always been. Just with federal approval this time. The silence stretched. Chun watched this exchange with visible interest, clearly recalculating her assessment of who these people actually were. Fine, Leo finally said. Isabella gets immunity. But she doesn't get to interfere with the foundation's restructuring. Chun made notes. We'll need the Russo evidence within 48 hours. After that, we move simultaneously, arrests, asset seizures, the full operation. You'll be in protective custody during the trials, 48 hours, Sophia repeated, calculating. Isabella's ultimatum expired in 36. They were racing against Leo's sister to save him from himself. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The federal raids happened at dawn on a Tuesday. Sophia watched the news coverage from her apartment, simultaneous operations at 4 Russo family locations, 18 arrests including Vincent Russo himself, millions in assets seized. The anchor described it as the culmination of a 5-year investigation, the biggest organized crime takedown in a decade. They didn't mention Leo's name. That was part of the deal. Isabella called an hour later. You did this. Her voice shook with something between rage and grief. You convinced him to betray everything. I convinced him to stop being what our father made him, Sophia said quietly. There's a difference. I spent years trying to expose him, and you just... Isabella's voice broke. You gave him a way out. I gave him a way forward. It's not the same as absolution. The line went silent for a long moment. The prosecutors offered me immunity. They said I could walk away. You should take it. Even after everything I tried to do to you? To the foundation? Sophia thought about vengeance and cycles and the difference between justice and revenge. Especially because of that. Someone has to choose differently. The foundation's transformation took 3 months. An independent board was established with community members, nonprofit experts, and federal monitors. Every funding source was documented, traced, legitimized, or replaced. External auditors reviewed every program, every expense, every decision made over the past 5 years. Maria, James, and Elena were cleared completely, unwitting participants in something larger than they'd understood. They stayed on, committed to the work despite the complications of its history. Leo's legitimate businesses were restructured under federal oversight. His criminal operations were systematically dismantled, assets distributed or seized, territories absorbed by the vacuum his absence created. He moved through it all with the exhausted compliance of someone who'd been carrying a weight so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to stand upright. Sophia insisted on professional distance. She became the foundation's independent director, reporting to the board rather than to Leo. Their relationship existed in the margins now, late evening calls, occasional dinners, the careful navigation of 2 people trying to build something honest from dishonest beginnings. 3 months after the raids, they met at the community center. Leo looked different. Thinner, older, but somehow lighter. The constant vigilance had faded from his eyes, replaced by something that might have been peace, or might have been exhaustion. First transparent annual report, Sophia said, handing him the bound document. Every dollar accounted for, every program evaluated, every outcome measured. No secrets, no complicated funding sources. Just the work. Leo flipped through pages documenting after-school success rates, recovery program outcomes, elderly care engagement metrics. Real data about real people being genuinely helped. Marcus got into Rutgers, he said quietly. I know. He sent me his acceptance letter. Sophia smiled. He wants to study social work. Says someone showed him that helping people matters more than making money. He's smarter than I was. He had better options than you did. That's what we're trying to create. Better options for the next generation. They sat in comfortable silence, watching through the office window as kids filtered into the after-school program. Backpacks and laughter and the ordinary chaos of children who had somewhere safe to go. Do you think it was worth it? Leo asked. Everything we compromised to get here? Sophia considered the question carefully. I think change is messy. I think good can emerge from complicated origins if you're willing to do the hard work of transformation. I think we built something real, even if we built it wrong at first. That's not really an answer. It's the only answer I have. The door opened and Isabella stepped in, hesitant in a way Sophia had never seen her. The elegant armor was gone, replaced by jeans and uncertainty. Maria said I could find you here, Isabella said, looking between them. I wanted to. I don't know what I wanted. Maybe just to see it. The foundation. What it actually does. Leo stood slowly. You're welcome to tour the programs. Sophia can show you the transparent accounting you always insisted we should have. I wasn't wrong about what you were, Isabella said quietly. But maybe I was wrong about what you could become. I'm still becoming it, Leo corrected. Every day. That's the deal. Sophia watched this fragile moment of reconciliation between siblings who'd spent years destroying each other. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, too much damage for that. But it was acknowledgement, recognition that transformation was possible even when it seemed impossibly late. Isabella turned to Sophia. Thank you for finding a third option when I only saw two. After she left, Sophia and Leo returned to the window. Below, Marcus was helping a younger kid with homework, demonstrating the kind of patience someone had once shown him. Change is messy, Sophia said again, more to herself than to Leo. But it's still change. Leo reached for her hand, and she let him take it. Not romance exactly, not anymore. Something more complicated and more honest. Two people who'd chosen accountability over easy answers, who were building something meaningful from imperfect materials, who understood that redemption wasn't a moment, but a practice. Outside, the neighborhood continued its complicated existence. Crime and kindness, struggle and support, the messy reality of people trying to survive and occasionally managing to help each other along the way. The foundation's work continued. Imperfect, transparent, genuinely helpful. Not a fairy tale ending, but something more valuable, a difficult truth about how real change actually happens. One choice at a time. One day at a time. One person deciding to become someone different than who they were yesterday. It wasn't redemption. But maybe Sophia thought it was something better. So, what would you have done in Sophia's position? Would you have walked away on principle, or stayed to protect the good being done? If this story made you think, made you question, made you feel something, subscribe so you never miss another tale that challenges how you see the world. Trust me, the next one's even more complicated and interesting. Thank you.